But all she couldn't do was she couldn't stop herself from murmuring, "Please be careful, Kenny." He gave her a smile and nodded. "Don't worry, I ain't jumping out or nothing. All I just want to do is to see what we're dealing here. How's the sturdy door and all that?" "Good idea," Bonnie chimed in. "Seems like a lot of it not in the best shape, thanks to the lurkers." "You could say that again," Kenny said, as he felt up practically a large dent in the wall. "Good enough for us, though." He continued along to adjust into Clementine, feeling for any weak points that could possibly have been broken through, or those just feeling less stronger than others. He seemed to be like what he was finding, going by the pleased hums that he was given as he worked. Once he reached for the doors, he gently placed his tied hands on the handles. "Now let's see how strong these ropes are," he muttered to himself, giving the strongest nudges. Without the warning, the truck jerked slightly and brought it to hit a bump on the road. Everyone roughly jerked around, crying out in protest. It was something that they were still getting used to, and it wasn't uncommon, because they clearly were going up a hill. Clementine felt herself slowly drifting downwards towards the back doors. She placed her hands on the ground to steady herself, watching as the others do the same. It seemed to be the sudden jump that caused Kenny to drift too, and his body was now leaning on the doors. But the action caused enough doors to break open, and Kenny tumbled out with a yelp of surprise before anyone could move. Clementine stared eye-wide in the spot Kenny used to be standing at it. Her brain was taking its time to realize that he was not there anymore. She looked around from back of the spot to the others, their shocked expressions as well. Everyone was thinking the exact same thing. They couldn't even think of anything. Just like that, the escape route had presented itself to them. "Kenny, are you okay?" Clementine called out, watching the man roll down the hill until a tree made him stop. He lifted his head instantly, wasting no time gesturing his hands to them fall. "Come on!" he yelled, not even bothering to be quiet anymore. Jane didn't need to be told twice. She practically leaped to her feet and dashed out the back, tucking and rolling swiftly to do a somersault down the hill. Clementine jogged after her, surprised she was able to do the same so quickly and perfectly. But there was no time to ponder. Bonnie stood up next, wobbling a bit as she tried to steady herself. With the doors wide open, it was difficult to stand, but the next exit was slight enough to be instinctive. "Let's go!" she cried, helping Mike to his feet beside her. "Hold on, kids," Mike protested, gazing towards Arvo, Sarah, and Clementine. "We'll be okay, go," Clementine heard herself calling. She turned over to Sarah. "We need to get Arvo to stand up." Sarah then nodded. Nothing else needed to be said. "Arvo, here, let me help," she cried, crawling over to him to his feet. Without any hesitating, she slung his wrist over her shoulder and wrapped her hand around his side, keeping them sturdy as he stood up. With his bad leg was a bit shaky, but otherwise he looked okay. Clementine looked overwhelmed at the same sensitive situation. She almost didn't have any time to jump around, proud of Sarah, as she did. Instead, acknowledging, though, she focused on standing up herself, calling over to her friend. "We have to jump together. If you fall, you keep your head ducked in and hope for the best." Sarah shakily nodded, exchanging glances with Arvo. "Are you ready?" she asked him. Arvo exclaimed, and the two tumbled out of the truck, leaving Clementine to jump out last. She then watched her friends coming to a halt on the hill, skidding down a few extra feet, eventually stopping. Everyone seemed unharmed, able to keep the balance on such a steep hill just fine. Clementine swallowed hard as she made her way to the door, hearing everyone called out her name. This was it. She held her breath and closed her eyes, pretending she was about to jump into a swimming pool, and she leaped. Unfortunately, she wasn't as graceful as she imagined, as she ended up falling rather awkwardly. She took her own advice, though, and ducked her head, and as she plunged to at least keep herself from any major injuries. In desperate, albeit stupid, attempt to stop, she spread on all fours to climb out her limbs out, turning to any exposed skin that was in the fraction of the snowy dirt. Although it was painful, her strange method of stopping did seem to help her stop as well. As she slowed, she lifted her head up to gaze after the truck, which was still making its way on top of the hill. It was still slower than she thought, but it was a steep incline, so it made sense. "Is everyone okay?" Kenny asked, walking beside her, shaking his head in all the clear. The group murmured in acknowledgement, or to their heads, but no one else seemed to be up for reacting otherwise. That was pretty fucking intense. Despite it on his wraps, he then looked, his face was pure of relief. Clementine felt a bit relief feeling, but a giant weight lifted her shoulders. They weren't done with the house guards, as they still had AJ to rescue, but at least everyone was safe for now, and she felt somewhat of worry churning in her stomach dissolve away, and she knew her friends were fairly unharmed. As she swept her gaze around the group, assessing each other of their states to absolutely make sure that they were fine, eyes caught off a sight of a piece of rope still attached to Kenny's jacket. It must have snagged onto him from when he first fell out of the truck, the end still fraying and torn. Kenny then followed her eyes, chucking Elaine a little bit of amusement. Well, it seems like a friend followed me. He tore it off and threw it into the snow. But something about it intrigued Clementine for a reason that she didn't understand. She then felt her hand closing around it. Before she could stop herself soothing her fingers over the material, her heart sank. She quickly whipped her head around and gazed up at the truck. It was just reaching the summit of the hill, allowing the split-second glimpses of the back doors hanging open, and there all she could need to see, or not see was in this case. There was no rope at either of the doors, only a piece was shut to use. She then glanced at the palm of her hand, a small cut of the rope with two distinctive knots. Son of a bitch!